Hello, everyone. Come on in, sign in, put your comments. Let us know where you're streaming from. Let us know where you're watching from. Hey, Cheryl Brewer, how are you? Come on in, guys. We got a great conversation tonight. Oh my gosh. Please share as you come in. Share with your friends. Share. Tag somebody. Tag your girlfriend. This is going to be a wonderful conversation tonight. And share with your friends. Share. Right. Hi. Hello, Nikki from New Jersey. How are you? Come on, we're giving you guys some time to come in, share with your friends. We want as many people as we can to watch. This is going to be an incredible conversation. We're going to give you a few more minutes to come in. So this is my little moment to be transparent. I was working on some intro music, theme music, to have you guys listen to some music before you came in, and I was supposed to get it to my tech so that he can add it, and I forgot all about it. So so that's why you have this me talking to you saying, "Come on in, come on in." Next week we're gonna have some music. We're gonna be grooving to. Hey, Tamra. Hi. Thank you. Remember branding last week we talked about branding. My brand manager told me I needed some color in my life. So that's why I have on the green. Come on in. Tamara, share that on your page for me, please. Text somebody that should be watching. Everybody should be watching. Because whether you know someone or you yourself, we're going to talk about the signs. We're going to talk about what domestic violence looks like. And you may not be aware of all the signs. And we want you to have all of that good information. Thank you for sharing, Tamara. Come on in. Wonderful. Thank you, Jesus. Wonderful. I lost chastity. Come back, chastity. Wonderful. Y'all coming in. Y'all coming in. Chastity's back. Chastity's back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we're going to give it a 30 more seconds. 30 more seconds. You know how people need a little time to click on, get themselves situated. And so I found some good music. You know how talk shows have their own theme music? So I found my own theme music. And so we're gonna have some I'll debut my I'll debut my theme music next week. It was supposed to be today, but I totally forgot to send the engineer, who I should call the engineer, the file. And I looked at the time and I was like, oh, well, I won't have theme music tonight. Wonderful. Okay, guys, we're going to get started with the incredible conversation. Harvest Conversations, welcome, welcome to another week of Harvest Conversations. I'm so excited. This is my second episode, and I'm excited about it. And tonight we're going to be talking about quarantined with the enemy. Quarantined with the enemy, a discussion on domestic violence. And we have two experts, I should say, in their own right on this topic. We have Chastity Crespo. Wave your hand, Chastity. Chastity is a life coach and speaker and writer and founder and leader of Hesba Women's Ministry. Chastity graduated from Nyack College. She holds a master's in mental health counseling, and she currently works with women who experience trauma for various forms of abuse, and she provides trauma-informed therapy. And we're so excited to have her here tonight. I was able to speak with her briefly on last week, and she is well informed and has incredible information for all of us. And then we have Jay Allen. Jay is a friend. We've been knowing each other for a few years now. I met Jay at a women's conference, I believe it was in New Jersey, and Jay was singing. Jay is a songbird, but she also has an incredible testimony. And she was able to share her testimony with me of how she is a domestic violence warrior. We don't say survivor, we say warrior, because she came out of it and went through it and came out of it, and now she is an advocate for domestic violence. um she's been known or referred to as the Harriet Tubman of domestic violence. That means she gets them out and she gets them to a safe place. um she is also an author and a recording artist. She's an entrepreneur. She has so many different um, things that she's working on. But we are talking tonight about domestic violence, and we welcome you both to Harvest Conversations. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. So
Thank
let's get
you.
started. Let's get started. Let's get with the conversation of domestic violence, quarantine with the enemy. Um, Governments worldwide have imposed lockdowns now, with the coronavirus, but those same restrictions have increased the risk of associated with domestic violence, especially with women, children, and the LGBTQ individuals. Today, rising numbers of sick people, growing unemployment, all of this has increased anxiety and financial stress has and
Hmm.
scarcity in the community has increased this already challenging area that people are living with. And we're telling people to stay home and stay in a safe place, but sometimes the safe place is not at home. For some people, they were used to leaving and going to a
Hmm.
safe place on a daily basis, but now they're asked to shelter in place with someone who is the abuser. And I noticed a fact today, um, and it says it's important to remember that domestic violence was a global pandemic already before this pandemic that we're experiencing now called COVID-19. According to the statistics in the United Nations, 243 million women and girls between the ages of 15 and 49 worldwide, that's a worldwide number, were subjected to sexual or physical violence by an intimate partner in the last 12 months. So this means to me that someone somebody or to your left, to your right, or someone on your phone or one of your Facebook friends, someone has been affected or currently being affected and experiencing domestic violence. And so we want you all to know that it's something that we should talk about. We should be talking about it, and we're going to talk about it tonight. So Jay, tell us a little bit about your experience. Um, One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, I'm not sure where you want to start in your journey, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask, let's just start with how long were you married?
I was married 5 years. It's so hard to remember now. 5 years.
Okay.
I was married 5 years.
And
When we were dating, because I know now what to look for, I can tell you that there were signs. But at the time, I had no idea. There were no signs as far as I thought. He never was physical with me until after we got married. And I'm talking about after we left the reception, like the day we got married. We came home in we lived in the neighborhood where I grew up. And I didn't get married in that neighborhood because I felt like he was a hood celebrity and I just didn't want the whole hood at my wedding. So I moved it out of town. And so when we came back, one of the neighbors came out to greet us. And after he shook his hand and hugged him, he kissed me on the cheek and my husband lost it. He screamed so loud, the car windows rattled. He left me outside in my wedding dress and he went to bed. He went upstairs and went to sleep. He locked me out.
Wow. And this was on your wedding day?
It's my wedding day.
And so before then, there were no signs?
Well, because I know what the signs are now, there were signs, but I didn't know that they were signs. They didn't translate to me as warning signs. You know, like when we dated and we went out, we would go to dinner and I would go wash my hands. And when I would come back, he would have ordered my food. Now, granted, he was right in what he ordered, but he took away my right to choose. Things like that, you know, he was very controlling, but he was very subtle with it. So it was not something that I recognized as a sign at that time.
Right. So then this was your wedding night. So then how did it escalate? Of what happened? Like,
so after like the first 7 days, he didn't speak to me. Our first 7 days of marriage, he didn't speak to me. And I finally broke the silence and said, listen, we need to have a conversation. Because by that point, I was completely confused. I had been crying for 7 days because that's not why I got married. Right. And if I had known anything about annulment, I probably would have been on the first line smoking. But I didn't know anything about that. And the only thing I could think of at that time was that divorce was a sin. I did not want to be a spiritual adulterer for the rest of my life. So in that moment, I felt stuck. I remember saying to God, I don't know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, but you have to fix this. He progressively got worse. He got physical. He beat me. The first time he hit me, I just remember praying and saying I was shocked. And I remember praying and saying to God, if you let me wake up tomorrow, I promise I would try to figure this thing out because I just didn't know what else to do. But then Super Bowl Sunday, so like 3 months later, Super Bowl Sunday, he came home. He had been out watching the game. It was on a Sunday. I had been to church. I had cooked. The house was clean, so that really wasn't the issue. But he came in drunk. And I remember hearing him outside with his friends, and he broke glass in front of my door. And I said to God, I don't know what kind of monster this is that's getting ready to come in my house, but please protect my children. My children were home. And I could just sense that something was going to go wrong. And he came up the stairs. I unlocked the door. I didn't open the door because I didn't want to provoke him. I unlocked the door. It took him 45 minutes to get up the stairs. He was drunk. And when he came up the stairs, he wanted to be intimate. And this wasn't what I wanted to do. He grabbed me by my ankle and snatched me off the bed. At the foot of my bed was a dresser. So between the dresser and the bed, he snatched me. I hit the floor and he just started punching me. And a part of me had to fight back because I didn't want my kids to find me on the floor like that. So I fought back. I fought as hard as I could. Every time I tried to break away, he would grab me again. I finally broke away and got to the kids, to their room. You know, my big one was 11. My little one was 7. But he was asleep and he was little. And he's also autistic. So it was a little hard, you know, trying to figure this whole thing out and navigate through it. And I got her up and I told her to call my sister. He took the phone from her. Well, he was going to hit her. And I said to him, I said, please, that's a whole different kind of animal that's going to come up out of me. I'm going to kill you in front of these kids if you put your hands on my kid. Like, I ain't scared. Now, we're talking, he's like 6'2", 200 and something pounds. At that time, I probably was like 115 pounds soaking wet. But it was just like, if you hit my baby, it's going to be something different. He didn't. He took the cell phone and threw the phone up against the wall and it shattered. But she was able to make the call first. So he snatched the phone after the call had placed. I heard my sister outside blowing a horn. I grabbed the kids and we left. And I told the kids, I dropped them off to my mom. And I said to them, you know, let me figure this out. Don't tell anybody what happened. I told the big one. I didn't tell him. And I told you he's autistic. So he used to go in the closet. He went in the closet and one of my brothers met him in the closet. That's what they used to do. He told my brothers were in the gang at the time. So I got a phone call. They were sitting in front of my house with guns getting ready to spread the house. And I just was like, go home. Because he had a 4-year-old nephew that lived on the first floor. And he wasn't like my boyfriend. He was my husband. And I hadn't quite figured it out yet. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was in a spiritual battle as well as a physical battle. And I was kind of torn between, I just didn't know. And I couldn't go I felt like I couldn't go to the church and I felt like I couldn't go to my family. My husband was a Muslim, which I knew going into this. And so I just, you know, it just felt like not a good place to be. And I had to figure it out on my own. And he just progressively got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it wasn't always bad. You know, we had some highs and we had some lows. He didn't beat me every single day of my life, but towards the end of like the first year, I had just had enough. He had attacked me outside of an establishment. I had gone to karaoke, and my sister and I earlier that day had gone to the recording studio, and we kept hearing this clicking sound. And she said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's a recorder in this car somewhere." She was like, "No way." And I was like, "Yeah, it's a recorder in this car somewhere." And I found it, took it out, put it inside the compartment right between the driver's side and the passenger side. I didn't turn it off because I really didn't have anything to hide. My sister was sharing with me about her boyfriend at the time, who is now her husband. And when I got home, he went to the car to check the recorder quite naturally. And he accused the voice. It was my sister's voice, but he accused it to me. So I was like, listen, I'm going to karaoke. He showed up. He pulled me outside of the establishment. I left my pocketbook on the table because I wanted the people to remember that I had been in there for somebody to come looking for me. And he beat me. And the cops were sitting on the corner and they watched.
Outside in the street?
Uh-huh. And I'll never forget because there's this guy, and to this day, every so often he'll send me a message and say, "I remember when I saw him beating you and I tried to jump." He tried to jump out of his moving car and his wife stopped him. He said, "But there was also something in your eyes that was pleading with me." And I didn't want anybody else to get hurt. If the police were watching, it made no sense for nobody else to get involved. And after he kind of calmed down, I went back inside and I sat down and because now I'm embarrassed and now I really have to get my thoughts together. And the DJ was like, "Jay, can you sing this for me?" It was the song "I Am Changing" by Jennifer Hudson. And I sang it. I cried my face off. And when it was over, the police sent an escort. They were like, "We're going to escort you home."
Jay.
And I was like, "Home?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're going to escort you home." And I was like, "No, thanks." And I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have a plan B. Luckily, my children were with my mom. So that really wasn't the issue. But it was just like, you can't take me home because if I go home, he's going to kill me. So that's not where we're going. And I left. I remember walking into a precinct and saying, "I need to press charges." And the white woman was like, "Why? Did your boyfriend catch you in the bar talking to another man?" And I was like, not that it matters and not
Right.
that that makes it okay,
Right.
but no. And she was like, well, who do you want to press charges on? And I said, my husband, and started crying because at that point, it's like, wow, this is really real. This is not, you know, I didn't have a place to go. I went and stayed and slept on my sister's couch, and I just really had to figure it out because nobody gets married for this. So now I'm on her couch. I don't really want to explain it to her. I don't really want to go through it because I don't really know. I did go to the hospital for treatment, and he also went to the hospital for treatment. His middle finger was severed by the bone, but the skin was intact. And it just so happened that I
But that
had not
was
changed my last name, and neither had he hadn't changed his address. So we were in the hospital at the same time. We were in rooms right next to each other. I could hear him telling the police, my wife did this. She lived in such and such and such an address. And I just sat there because I never would have done that to him. You know, it was really, really, really horrifying for me. But the next day he was sending me emails with his x-ray pictures, like, this is what you did to me. I can't believe you did this to me. And I'm just like, well, what about what you did to me? I had a slight concussion. I had contusions. I had bruised ribs.
Jay, time out. Jay, wait, we gotta soak this in. Okay, wait a second. He severed his finger because
I did it fighting. We were
no,
fighting.
but it was you actually did, or it was because he was hitting you. He
No,
severed. You did it.
I defended myself.
You
We were
defended
fighting.
yourself.
I did it. Yeah.
Right. And then you had a concussion, bruises, and you went and sang, I'm changing.
Mm-hmm.
Girl.
Yeah. I'm changing. Yeah.
Girl. Yeah. But then what year was this? You remember the year? You guys are frozen. You remember the year, Jay?
2010. I got married September 2009. That happened in February 2010.
Wow. And then that was the night you said that was it.
Well, I think all victims or people who have experience will understand that you'll probably say that's it a whole lot of times. That probably was the first time I ever said that was it. I was separated from him for a while, and then my children, I take my children to church, you know, and my children were convicted about forgiveness. Why? How come God can forgive us, but I could not forgive him? And I didn't really have any language for them. I knew that they were putting into practice what I taught them. And so now I have to live by example. So I asked them, did they want him to come back home? They said yes. So we went back, and I went back bearing gifts. I came back with the movie Fireproof because by now I don't really know what to do. I had been trying to work on this long before it had gotten to this point because he just wasn't a communicator. You know what I mean? Like, he just would give me the silent treatment. You know, he would just stop talking. That's how I knew when he was angry with me. He would shave the hair off his face. Like, he did things like that to me before it was actually physical. You know, financially, he wouldn't take care of this bill or take care of that bill, or he would not wash, or he would only wash his clothes, or if I cooked, he would come in and cook his own food as if I didn't cook at all. So it just, you know, there were different levels to what we experienced as a family. And so when we came back in, he said to me, I don't really know how you could forgive this monster. And in my head, I'm saying, I don't really know either, but I have an obligation to forgive you. And at that time, I don't think I really had a clear understanding of what forgiveness is. And so to me, forgiveness is, I'm going to forgive that this happened, and we're going to still try to work it out. And I tried. I really did. I took the Love Dear Journal. If you guys are familiar with the movie Fireproof for married couples or whatever, I did that, all of that. But I was doing that way before we had gotten to this point, and he was not interested. And now that he had violated me to such an extent that I took a stand and left the house, Now he wanted to work on his marriage and do this love dear journal. And by that point, I was like completely removed from the situation. I was kind of going through the motions for my kids because my son, he actually was the only father my son knew. And I didn't really know that they had that kind of connection because he didn't call him daddy or anything like that. I didn't really realize how strong the connection was until it was all over. But I was really trying for them at that point because, again, nobody gets married to get divorced. And that was the whole thing that I had to wrestle with. I had to come to terms with, listen, divorce is going to be a sin like anything else. You're just going to have to forgive it and confess it to God. And you and God just going to kind of have to work through this thing because this man is going to kill me. I don't know. I'm not sure about anything else. I am absolutely 100% positive about this. He is going to kill me. And I remember I used to lay in the bed and I used to just speak to the enemy. You can't have my life. He'd be sleeping. I would just speak to the enemy. You're not going to kill me. You know, I've been choked with telephone cords. The police have come to my house and have not taken him, told him to just go take a walk. His sister lived downstairs on the first floor, but his other sister is a prosecutor. So a lot of that is the reason why the system completely failed me. When Sandy hit, and this was in my tenure with Sandy had hit, but prior to that, one of my friends in Virginia, I was talking to her and I was just saying to her, listen, I think I'm leaving for good. I'm not coming back. And she was like, don't go. God could fix it. Listen, I believe in the power of God and I believe that God could do anything, but I also believe that you have to want God to fix it. And he was completely 100% sure and good with who he was and where he was at. And so I made a decision to leave. 2 days later, my friend was killed by her husband.
No.
And so I was like, okay, yeah, that was a sign for me that could very well be me. And as much as I wanted my marriage to work, as much as I wanted to find what was that was broken in me that would be fixed as if it was me, I'm in a place now where I know it wasn't me. You know, while I do have issues, I know that I am not the reason why he was doing what he was doing to me. But I just, at that point, I had to figure out some courageous stuff because now I'm getting ready to lose everything because I'm not coming back. I was on Section 8 at the time, and although they were only paying $50 of my rent, it was still something to have. I left the apartment, everything in the apartment. I took my kids, and I didn't have anywhere to go. I used to work nights at Jersey City Medical Center. I used to take my kids with me to work and put them to sleep, wake them up in the morning, take them to school. And we did that religiously. My children at the time did not know that we were homeless. They just thought I didn't have a babysitter. And I did that. We did that for about 16 months. And then Sandy hit. I got a place and Sandy hit and we lost all electricity and all the heat. And so my husband called DIFUS on me. And I had a friend who worked there and she called me and she told me, and I was just like, okay, tell me what to do. And she said, make a counter call and tell them that you just can't take it, whatever. And I made the counter call. They dispatched this lady to my house and I had a conversation with my children. I told them that I was going to pack their clothes and that they were going to go with this lady. And that if they would give me 2 weeks, I would come and get them. I was just going to work overtime every day for 2 weeks. The lady came. I had their clothes packed at the door. And then I had never had DIFUS, so I didn't know that she had to have a conversation with them in a separate room. She had to do all of this conversation, and she did. And she came back and she told me that my husband was showing up at their schools and threatening them, which I did not know. And she told me that he was threatening to kill them. And she asked them why they didn't tell me. And they said, because my mom would kill him if we told him. I had no idea. So, you know, I'm not prejudiced, but this white woman was looking at me like I didn't want to put, you know, like I didn't want to do the right thing. So I said, listen, I've been down the road of getting a restraining order. If you think that you could go with me to a precinct and give me a restraining order, I'll go. She didn't believe me. We went. She showed her badge. She showed all her credentials. She showed them all kind of paperwork, and they would not give me a restraining order. And she says to them, you're supposed to give her an immediate temporary restraining order. And the officer said back to her, it's at our discretion. It is not at their discretion, but it is because of who he was. His name kept coming up. They would run his name and then decide not to do what they were supposed to do. So I said to the lady, I said, listen to me. And she was crying, and I felt really bad for her. But at that point, I didn't feel bad because I had already been down this road, and I only went through the motions for her because I didn't want them to go on record saying that I refused to go get help. I refused to do anything. I worked. I was in college. I wasn't on any public assistance. I didn't have anything. I didn't have anywhere to go. I had nothing to lose but my children, and I was willing to give them to the system for 2 weeks so I could work overtime so I could get them out. DYFS in turn paid for my security deposit to move. I had to move out of the city, which for me was a whole inconvenience because that's all I know. But anyway, I did. I moved. And when my kids went to school, I refused to provide the address. And nobody told me that when you have a restraining order, and because I didn't have a restraining order because they refused to give it to me, Motor Vehicle has an application that you can put your P.O. box on your license when you're a victim of domestic violence. But you have to have a restraining order. And of course, because I didn't have a restraining order, it didn't apply to me. So now I refuse to provide my living address for my children because my children were still going to school in the same city because it was too far in the year to just pull them out. And again, my son is autistic, and I felt like stability was the right thing, and they wouldn't, so now I got back into the system for DYFS because now I'm homeless. I wasn't, but that's how it was on the system. And we just really went through a really, really, really tough time. I was in school at the time to be a medical assistant. I graduated in the top of my class and was the motivational speaker for graduation. And for me, it was just an example for my kids. Like, I'm going through all of this and I'm doing this and I could pull A's. There's no reason why you can't give me straight A's in school.
Right.
That was what we did. I got laid off after that from working at the hospital. It just was a whole one thing after the next. I just experienced one thing after the next, but he was still looking for me.
So Jay, I'm gonna have you pause right there because you said a lot of things, and I'm writing stuff down so that Chastity, our therapist, our life coach, our mental health counselor, she could come in and give us some information, some clarity, and on everything, because I want us to understand now, right? So you're a survivor of this, and we get that, and you're a warrior of this. But Chastity, can you speak to the why? Right? Why would someone stay with someone who is hurting them?
I mean, that's such a complex question. We get that question. I get that question all the time from individuals, right? Especially considering the population I work with. But I think that it's complex because there's a lot involved, right? And some stay because, hey, my children, right? There's my children. I don't want them growing up without a father, right? They stay because sometimes which is a great majority of time, they've grown so, the individual being abused has grown so accustomed to being abused that it somewhat becomes a normalcy for them, right? It becomes something that they're accustomed to, right? And so you minimize it. Well, it's really not that bad, so I'm gonna stay, right? It's not that bad. This individual loves me, right? Some stay for the factors of maybe they're here undocumented, right? And so they stay because where am I going to go? Right? Or this person who's abusing them has control over them. Sign those papers for you to become a citizen, right? So there's various reasons why people stay, but the ultimate reason is usually the individual loves the abuser.
And they think they're gonna get better.
Yes, and
right?
you think that you can save them, right? You see good in them, and only if I can rescue them. They've had a hard life. They've been wounded, right? I can help them. But in reality, they can't.
Right. And then you talked about the control. So how does that control show up? Tell me what that looks like.
Well, control shows up in many forms. Control shows up in the financial, right? The person being abused may not have a debit card, have no control of the finances. They're not allowed to pay any of the bills, right? The abuser controls it completely. Control over where the individual being abused goes, right? Where you're going, who you're with. Isolation is a big factor, right? So
Mm,
moving them away from their family, their friends, the people they associate with, right? Another factor of control is just simply manipulation, emotional abuse, right? So it's, which is called gaslighting. It's to make the individual feel, the person that they're abusing, feel like it's their fault. If you had
mm.
done something, right, then you wouldn't be being abused. So if I make it seem like it's on you and it's your fault, right, then you're not going to look at me like it was all on me because you made me do it.
Right. And so to use that for an example, so in Jay's situation, Jay, we're just gonna just dissect everything that you said.
Hmm.
So to use that in Jay's situation, like the things that he would come in the house and not speak to her for days.
Oh no, he was definitely, there was a lot of things I heard in her story where
Yeah.
he was controlling, such as going into the home, right? Not cooking for her or the children, cooking for him, washing clothes, but not washing hers, only washing his, right? So all of those factors were a form of somewhat control. It was control, right? And so I don't need you, right? She's doing all these things for her children and her home, but I'm going to do me, and I'm not going to allow you to do me, right? And so it was a form of not allowing her to, though she may have wanted to.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And then the whole not speaking, because people not speaking to each other. So is that a form of control? Like I'm controlling whether or not we have a conversation or not, right?
Yeah, it is, because I mean, the person on the opposite side of the spectrum in the relationship who's being abused wants to feel love. They want to feel wanted, right? They want to have these conversations of perfection, in any sort of way of conversation, right? And so while they're being ignored, it leads them to show that you don't deserve my attention.
Mm,
So I'm
that's
not going to
good.
give it to you.
Wow. Wow, that's good. That's good. Um, so you were talking about the different types of abuse. So there's the physical abuse, right? And so we all know
Yes.
about that, and we always think that that's the only form. But then there's
Mm-hmm.
also what do you say, Chastity? What are the other forms?
There's emotional abuse.
And
There's
how does that look?
psychological.
How does the emotional?
Emotional abuse is playing with the individual's feelings,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's controlling their feelings, what they feel, right? And so, I love you. I want to be with you. You're the only one for me. But in the background, they're doing other things. I promise you, I will never do it again. Whatever that other thing may be,
Mm-hmm.
right? For them, that they're continuously experiencing. The next is psychological, right? Playing with their mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Controlling their minds, their thoughts, um, allowing them to feel about themselves that they're not enough, right? That they're not of worth. Who's going to want you? No man's going to want a woman with how many children? No man's going to take care of you or love you like I love you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's entwined with psychological and emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, then there's the financial control,
Mm-hmm.
right? Abuse of controlling every aspect of the money that comes into the home, and possibly not allowing the woman being abused or the individual being abused to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And then I think you mentioned sexual abuse as well.
Yes, there's sexual abuse. So um, basically taking over control of, they're possibly even withholding
Mm-hmm.
from the person that they're in the relationship with, right? And so they're the abuser. So I'm going to withhold. sex from you purposely because you maybe possibly disgust me or I don't want you, right? And so, or there's the other form of just taking it, right? And so the woman doesn't want to, she doesn't feel loved, she doesn't feel of worth, right? He doesn't treat her kindly. And so then what he does is he just takes it from her.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. There are all types, and I see people are typing in the comments that there are different all types of abuse, but I think these are the like I want to say this the set, and then there are subsets of it. So the psychological
Mm-hmm.
abuse would be mental and emotional, right? And so it just looks different way. And one of the things that I wanted to peel back and make sure that we made aware tonight was how you may be putting up with something that you say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's just him, or oh, that's just her, but it's
Mm-hmm.
actually abuse, right? And
Yes.
so you may be, be abused, for years and don't even call it abuse because he's not, or she, we're saying he because it's 99% happening,
Percent.
to women.
Yes.
So for the most part is women that are being abused. So that's why we keep saying that. But for the most part, it's you could be abused and not even aware or not calling it that, right?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one of the others I forgot, another form of abuse is the verbal, right? And
Okay.
verbal is with the words, right? And so
Yeah.
many are in a relationship that they're being spoken to a particular way. Well, and that's just them, right?
Hmm.
That's just how he speaks to me,
Hmm.
and it's done in front of people. It may be done in private, right? If you have children, in front of the children, so the children hear, um, their mother being called names, right?
Hmm.
Being degraded and demeaned. And, you find that many people don't realize they're being abused because some of it's based on culture, right? What they were raised in, right? If they were raised in a household where the man dominated, right, for generations, right? Maybe their grandfather, when you do the history, their grandfather, their own, father. Um, you find that usually it continues to play this pattern, and it's not that they go looking for this type of individual, right? It's just that these are wounded individuals,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
in their
and
woundedness,
and
it's
and
kind of
I
like
know that
you.
you're the therapist, and I know that you're the expert, but I kind of think they go after them. I think that they look for insecurity in in them. They're attracted to that insecurity in the other individual, so they're
Mhm.
attracted to something that will allow that behavior. And when either it's a low self-esteem, or either it's someone that needs the attention, and that's how they woo them in, because there's flowers, there's roses, there's candy, it's Red Lobster. but
Mhm.
and then we, that's that. Okay, I got her, and then now let me groom her into control. So I don't
Well,
really
that would
think.
be, but
Yes.
that would be, Terry, a different type of abuser, right? That's
Okay.
one who's completely aware that
Mhm.
they are controller, right? Whereas you have others who are not aware that that's what they are, right? And
Okay.
so even in the abuser, there's 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 various forms of even abusers, right? And so this one may come and they know they're abuser, right? And so they
Okay.
come with manipulation, they come with, the sweet talk in the ear, they come with the giftings, right? And then you find later on when they get married, he's beating on her, right?
Wow.
He's physically beating on her, emotionally, verbally. And then you have the flip side, someone who may meet someone, right? And this individual, I mean, there's always really, I think the majority of the time, there's signs,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And you see it, but you kind of avoid it, right?
Mhm.
And you say, well, it's not that bad,
Mhm.
right? Oh, they're punching the ceiling of the car because we're in traffic. It's not that bad,
Mm.
right?
Mm. Mm.
But when you're
So,
so far deep into it, you look back and you go, wow, the signs were there. And I just totally ignored it.
right. So Jay, I gotta ask you, were there did you grow up or did you see this happening a pattern in your family growing up? Is this something that you saw was acceptable?
I saw, I didn't see it in my home, but I did witness it
Mhm.
between family members, and it just seemed like the only person affected was me because I didn't know what was going on. But yeah,
Mm,
I saw it growing up, off and on. I saw it, and nobody really did anything about it except have conversations with me about what I thought. How did I feel? And I really didn't know what to feel because I didn't really have. There was not really a proper conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and when you grow up in church and everybody in your family is in church, this is a conversation they don't have in church. They
Right.
teach you to be
mm-hmm.
married,
Yes.
figure out how to be a good wife, and that's it.
Right.
And for me, that was the biggest part of my struggle
Right.
because it didn't really have nothing to do with the church folk. Because in my marriage is where I really learned to know God for myself in my marriage, because He was the
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
only person that I had and had to rely on. But I had to come out of the opinions of people and really figure out who Jay was and live for that.
Mhm.
And that's, I
Yes.
didn't, I don't, I'm not speaking against the church. I'm just
Of
saying
course.
that this is a
Mm-hmm.
conversation that they don't have. I see it now more in churches
Mm-hmm.
than ever before. But in 2009, when I got married, they weren't having this kind of conversation.
Right.
And if you brought it up, it was shushing you into a back room. And what
Mm-hmm.
happens in your home stays in your home. Just make sure you cooking and make sure you clean. And that's wrong. It's so wrong on so many levels, because I was broken. And my husband actually went to the church for counseling,
Uh-huh.
and he called me. He was my dad. He called me like, can we come and talk? And I was like, I'll show up, but I don't really have anything to say. And he got into this meeting, and my father was like, do you want this? You want your marriage? And he was like, no.
Mhm.
So now I'm looking around this room like, well, what I'm here for? And I also felt
Mm,
like there was a battery in my back. I felt protected because I was with my dad. You know what I mean? So now I could tell the truth to somebody, and somebody's going to do something about what's happening to me. But it did. When I got home, I got beat for telling it, and because it
mm-hmm.
ended up that the conversation was centered on what he had done wrong, what he was doing wrong, what we needed to change, and that wasn't the way he thought the conversation was going to go. So it turned into a whole big thing. And then going to counseling, he was saying, if you don't go, this marriage is over. I'm going, but I'm
Mm,
only going because I want to hear what they gonna say. This marriage is it was over the day you hit me, the first day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right. Right.
it was over
Right.
already. I was
Right.
just kind of trying to figure out how I was
How
gonna
to
get
get
out.
out.
But now that somebody else knows what's happening,
Right.
but it just didn't go that way. And I really had to make a decision for Jay and for my children. And so I left. I left everything I knew. I gave up my Section 8 because that $50 wasn't worth my life.
Uh-huh.
And I suffered for it. I was homeless. Like, I really was at the bottom. And then,
mm-hmm.
so he died in
Mm.
2014.
Mm.
I went to court. I tried to divorce him like 3 times. The judge the last time went on record saying that they were sabotaging me. They were taking things out of the
Mm,
docket, so I couldn't get a divorce. There were things that were needed in order for her to grant me a divorce. And she said, your name keeps coming across my desk before the docket even hits my desk. I'm telling you, she said, I'm
mm,
going on record saying they're sabotaging you. And I was so angry and
And
upset.
this was because his family was in the legal system.
Right.
What do
I
you say?
went.
He was a what?
The sister was a prosecutor.
The sister was a prosecutor.
And I came
yes.
outside and I heard God say, look again. And I was like, sir, listen, I don't want to look again. I want out. I recognize that I got myself into this, but I don't even want it anymore. I'm trying to do the right thing and get out of it. And you just won't let me out. And God kept telling me to look again. And, I looked again. He took me to that story about Elijah sending the man out 7 times. And, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Saw a cloud, but
Mm-hmm.
the cloud don't
Yeah.
look like.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it don't look like it. I don't care what it looks like. I want out. And I literally was running. He literally was trying to find me. And then September the 4th, 2014, they called me and said they found him dead.
Mm.
And
Mm,
because I was legally married to him, I had a responsibility to him. And I went through some things with the family, and it was just like, God, look, they can have it. I don't even feel like it's done. But what I realized is that God had given me the victory
Mm,
in a way that I never would have gotten it in divorce. He still would
mm,
have felt like a
Mm.
part of me he owned. And I went to see him, and I just told him, like, I can't let you go in the ground with my integrity.
mm.
You cannot go into the ground with my self-worth. You cannot have my
Jay.
self-esteem. You can't have it. I came here to get it back.
Mm.
And that actual conversation turned into a stage play that I did a few years
Woo.
ago. But it was different. The thing was, then I had to learn how to stop living on the run, because I was still living like I was in a situation. I was still living like I couldn't trust anybody. I still wouldn't give out my address. I still wouldn't give out my phone number. So I was free from the situation, but in my mind I was still bound. And it took a lot of work to rebuild myself, to rebuild my own self-trust, to rebuild my
Yeah, of
own
course.
value,
Yes.
to rebuild my own self-worth, to learn to love me again, to set standards for myself, things that no matter what, I'm not compromising for nothing. I know the signs now, and I'm not overlooking nothing. You feel how you want to feel about me, but I want to live. And so, it really, 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 really altered me a lot, a lot.
Yeah. I can imagine there's a lot that you have to build back because you were broken down. So you have to build back up and get different ways to do that. Chastity,
Yeah.
can we talk about why is it so difficult in the system? Why is it so difficult? I know that you're working with women, and I know that the agency that you work for helps women, but why is it so difficult? Why don't people, the system take, domestic violence seriously or more seriously?
Um, I believe many are starting to. Um, However, every part of Jay's story, like going into the court system, it's constantly, them messing with the docket, taking out documents. I deal with that with clients all the time in the system,
Really?
right? Yes, all the
And
time,
and so
right?
who's changing docket numbers?
They won't tell you. They'll make it seem like, well, we don't know how that happens, we don't understand, right? Especially if they had a spouse or partner that worked into the system, right? Whether it was a court officer, someone who worked in a courthouse, possibly NYPD, right? um it's just this system is,
It's
I
broken.
find, and what I have observed is that this acts as though it's for the family and it's for the protection of these individuals being abused, but you find that they're not. They're not. And even for the children in general, because after that, it's also having to protect the children, right? In the family court, for these individuals who were being abused, right? And so to get an order of protection for 5 years, right, in the state of New York is so extremely difficult. Usually get a year or 5 years is.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit on my end. But talk more about what you do at
Oh,
your agency. Like when you said that referrals come to you, they're referred to you. She frozen.
Mm-hmm.
for
Chastity Chastity's up in the mountains on a retreat. You're frozen,
hold on.
Chastity. Okay.
Can you hear me? Hold on one
Yeah,
second.
I got you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Um, the factor. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
No worries. Talk more about the system and more specifically what you do at your agency. No.
Every
I can't hear you. You're on a delay.
may want since
She breaking up to you, Jay?
Okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry.
If you keep talking right now, we can hear you.
Hold on 1 second. Let me see.
Jay,
Okay,
why she?
so what I
Uh-huh.
do is and process them to our system and provide them with therapeutic services for women or individuals who are being abused, and it's at no cost for them or their children who have witnessed it. And we give them trauma informed therapy along with essential needs.
Okay. Okay. And so when they come to you on the run, or they come to you helping, you need to help them, or what's the situation normally when they come to you?
I help.
Cassie?
I mean, I help them. So some of them, depending on what they're looking for and what help, if it's individual therapeutic services, and hold on 1 second. Let me see this.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you fix that. Chassie's up in the
Okay, hold
mountains on a
on.
retreat, and we appreciate her giving us some time while she's retreating. But
Okay.
Jay, talk
Yes.
talk more about what you're doing now as an advocate for the women.
As an advocate, I do a program a month almost at Bloomfield College with the college students, from freshman level all the way up to senior level, about education and domestic violence. I also do their RA training and training them in how to respond to domestic violence situations and sexual assault situations. I constantly get like inboxes and phone calls and messages from people all over the world with people they know that are involved in domestic violence situations and need to be relocated. And so most times, like my most recent, I put the lady on a plane from Florida to, she's in New Jersey now. Um, that's what I do.
Wow.
I'm probably more like, I've been watching The Closer a lot. Y'all watch that show, The Closer?
Yes. Yes.
I'm probably a lot like The Closer. You know, a lot of family members or a lot of friends reach out to me after they've been having conversations and they can't reach the person. Most times after they hear my story, they may not do it in front of their friends or their relatives, but they'll reach out to me later and say, listen, your story really helped me. I'm ready to go. So I help with plans. We call it safety planning.
Uh-huh.
So I help with safety planning and how to put a plan together to make a plan of action to leave. Code words, code signals, code things you hang. Like I teach women, you know, if you get a friend and they ride by your house and see something purple in the window, that they know that it's a situation to dial 911, safe words and things like that.
Mhm.
That's the kind of stuff I do now.
Jay.
And I
That
go to churches too. Churches now, more recently now, like within the last year, bring me in to have the conversation about domestic violence too.
that is incredible. I'm screaming. So I want to ask you all these kinds of questions. So it's like on a referral basis, right? So somebody says, Jay help me, so then you need to contact Jay.
Yes.
And then just by you going around doing this talks that you do and telling your story, they sort of like inbox you and like, look, I
Or
need help too.
or like, you know, like sometimes people take pictures of they got beat up and post their pictures on Facebook. My phone rings constantly. Can you help this girl? This is the situation. Here goes her Facebook. Here, can you reach out to her and
Yeah.
say this? Can you reach out to her? You know, and I, for the most part, I will reach out. You know, it doesn't hurt to reach out. They don't always reach back until somebody they actually know says you need to call this person. And you know, and then I get phone calls all over, all for real, all over the world. Jamaica, Bermuda. I had a mom call me from Bermuda, you know, but I just learned, and then I learned to train other people. So I went through um respond domestic violence response team training, which every state is supposed to have in every county, and unfortunately it's not happening the way it's supposed to. But they act as a liaison between the victim and the police officers. They're supposed to respond when there's a domestic violence situation. And so after my training,
every state is supposed to have
a domestic violence response team in every county.
Yeah. And so we need to know if we have one in our counties, right?
Correct.
And if we don't have one, then
you can call the police station, or you can call your council person. It's after so many domestic violence deaths, they put in like an ordinance or something that they have to have a domestic violence response team. So I'm from Jersey, so I know that in Jersey, in every county is supposed to be one. In every single county has to have a functioning domestic violence response team. But the reason why most counties don't have them is because they cut the funding.
Wow.
And so it's kind of falling to the wayside. But the thing is, the people are suffering because think about it. I'm in a domestic violence situation. You send 2 male officers to my house, and they saying, okay, what happened? And I'm saying he beat me, and I don't have no marks, or whatever the case may be. They're supposed to, if they see marks, if they see kicks on the door, if they see they're supposed to take somebody. What they do is they'll say, go take a walk. Cool off. They're not supposed to do that. But if the liaison is in place, the liaison acts as a liaison. It's a lot more friendlier, and it's a lot easier to talk to somebody who understands, as opposed to somebody who makes me feel like they just gonna take his side because he's a man, and he gonna give you the story about why he did what he did, and you don't see no, and that's just it. And it's, we have to be more responsible and accountable than that.
Yeah. And Chastity, is your agency a domestic violence liaison? Like, can someone come to you? You can't hear me. Chastity, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
You're on
I
mute
hear
then.
Jay, but I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry you're having trouble. Try it again, because I'm good. But Jay, that's crazy. But so what does the plan look like? I'm like all excited. So what does the escape plan look like? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. So does your agency do that, Chastity?
We provide advocacy, right?
Okay.
So big thing is like, me and my providing therapeutic services. There are times when I go to courts with clients for family courts. They just don't want to go by themselves. I think that what Jay is saying is very real, unfortunately, right? Of police officers showing up, possibly. There's so many calls, right? You minimize it, and because you don't see, once again, bruises, right? You don't see a black eye, you don't see marks on the throat, right? You don't see things maybe turned upside down in the house.
They lack sensitivity. No police officers.
Yeah, you may think that, oh, you know what? They're not being abused. They're not. So just go take a hike. Come back later when you're a little bit more calmer and you're a little bit more cooler. And that's really unfortunate, right? Because they're not in the situation. They're not within the circumstances of what that individual may be enduring.
Yeah, I want to do 2 more things, because I don't want to. This is a good topic. We could go on and on, but Jay, I want to know what that escape plan looks like.
Okay, so when a woman is ready, you have to teach them, first of all, if you're going to leave, you don't say that to the mate, because the highest number of murders and domestic violence happens after the mate says, I'm leaving. So what the first thing we do is we don't have conversations like that in the house, in the vicinity of them. No text messages, no emails, no phone calls, any of that. You only have the conversation with somebody you trust, preferably not anybody that is mutual between you and the partner. And what you do is you take your important documents, birth certificate, social security cards, insurance cards, whatever, ATM card, whatever like that. You put them in an envelope and you mail them to somebody that you trust, because those are the first things that they try to take to hold you there. If they get your important documents, you won't leave without your important documents. So your children's important documents, you get them and you send them to, or you give them to somebody to hold in a secure place. Little by little, you move things or you leave everything. It's up to you, totally up to you. I try to teach people, leave it and go. And when you get where you're going, start over. But it's not as easy for everybody. Some people are really attached to their things. I get that. It's just a lot more dangerous that way. Security deposits, there are agencies that will help with a security deposit, though sometimes you have to go through a shelter. So I also try to advocate for that, to go to a domestic violence shelter and let them place you, because your anonymity is protected like that, because nobody knows where you live. And I've lived in a shelter, a domestic violence shelter, so I know how that goes. You can't even have food delivered there. So but it is a whole process, but it's a very secretive process. You change phone numbers. You don't give access to the phone number to that person, and typically use a burner phone until you get to where you're going. And you have to be very careful about not leaving things around for the mate to see. Make sure that you get a burner phone to do all your important business, like searching for apartments and things like that, because abusers check Google search, they check your internet, they check your locations. I always teach people to disable your location on your phones.
Right.
They check your history. They go through your text messages. In my case, there was cameras all over my house I didn't know about. There were recorders all over my house that I didn't know about. There was a tracker on my car. He was getting all my text messages, all my emails. And so some things are unavoidable. You don't know that there's a tracker on your car or whatever. But for the things that you do know, you just have to be very careful. Be very careful and conscious of your conversations. Like the last woman I brought from Florida, she had gotten to the point, because she knew that the ticket was secured, she had gotten to the point where she would argue back. And I had to tell her, that's not what we're going to do. You're not going to argue back. You're not going to buck up against him, because they're more in tune than you think. They know when there's a certain change that comes out of nowhere. So you have to, whatever you were doing before, you have to be able to maintain that same level of commonality, because the slightest change in you will set him off and will make him more aware of what you're getting ready to do. And so that's typically how it goes.
Yeah. And Chastity, I know it's once they get out, there's a long way back mentally. I know you counsel women in this area, so talk to us about the mental health aspect of this, and how do you start building back in I guess I said a survivor of it once they get out. What are the things that they need to start working on mentally?
I mean, first you're working on their story, and right, so they you and these individuals are very broken and wounded, and they wear it. They come in, and it just, you see the heaviness and you hear the stories, and so sometimes it's hard to um, just start working on that. Sometimes it's just listening to their story, right, and allow them to get it out. Hidden it for so long, no one to hear them or listen, right? Um, and they go into extreme details of what that is to them, right? And so it's just being very present in those moments and to where they are at. You find that a lot of the effects of trauma, of their abuse, um, has to do with you over here, I'm not enough, you know, um, I'll never be good enough. Who's gonna marry me? Who's gonna want me? Who's gonna love me? Right? What Jay spoke about, the fear, right? Although they're not around any longer, right? Maybe even possibly move to another state. They're looking over their shoulder all the time. They're not trusting anyone. They're fearful of whatever numbers that are calling them, right? And hanging up, right? Um, there's a lot of fear, right? And it's a process, right? And it's not a linear process. It is a long process, and especially depending on the longevity of the abuse and the extent of it.
Yeah. And Jay, did you get counseling?
I did actually. I got counseling, but a lot of it I had to do the work on myself. Get in the mirror and start talking to myself. Like, I don't know what I would do if something happened to you. And for a long time, I couldn't do it. Every time I would go to the mirror, I would cry because I felt like I let myself down. Forget everybody else, I felt myself. I think when you see other people go through things, you have those conversations with yourself. Like, I would never let anybody do this to me. I would never, you don't really know how you fall into it. And sometimes you just fall into it. And
Mhm.
so I did go to counseling, and but I had to learn to do the self work. I had to get prepared for counseling. I had to be ready to share with her, which means I had to come to truth with me first so that I could share my truth with her. And like Chastity said, like I did an event, I want to say 2 years ago, called I Can Hear You, where I asked everybody to write letters to women who were in domestic violence situations, whether they knew them or not, and to donate a pair of earrings to signify, because it's about building them up.
Mhm.
And granted, you can't, it doesn't happen overnight, but if I build you up on the outside, it has to trigger something on the inside. But I do an exercise when I go in, I give out name tags, and I say to them, if I ask you who you were and not what you call yourself, what would you tell me? And most people will say back their name. But on my name tag always says I'm unapologetically dope. And I wait for somebody to ask me, what is that? And I say, I make no apologies for my dopeness. I paid a price to get here. I had to climb over some hurdles. I had to go through some things. I had to experience some things.
Yeah.
I was knocking on death's door. And because I made it out, I'm dope by itself, just like
Come
that.
on.
And so everywhere I go, that's normally my icebreaker. I'll take out a name tag and I'll say, if I act, and I do it personally. I walk around the room and I'll say, if I ask you who you are and not what you call yourself, what would you tell me? Whatever they tell me, it has to be something positive. I write on the name tag and I address them by that, because we get caught up in our titles. We get caught up in our names that we fall so far away from who we are. You know, and like I did it, and this guy was like, he kept saying his name, and I said, well, how about I write King? And every time I walked around the room, I said, King, you want something to drink? King. And then I saw him cross out my handwriting and write King in his own handwriting. He goes, I'm a king. I'm like, yeah. But it's about building. You got to build that up. Like she said, it is a process and it does take time. And you have to be patient with yourself. Your
Right.
process is not going to be like the next person's process. It's not always going to be as pretty, and it may not be as painful, but it is still a process. And
Mhm.
so just be patient with yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And I was gonna ask you what, and I guess I'll start with Chastity. What would you tell someone who's listening? What advice would you give them to tell them to do something tomorrow? What should they do tomorrow to have a different day than today?
You asking me?
Chastity.
Okay.
What would I tell them to do? I would say, depending on where they're at. Um, I always love the of the mirror, like Jay, and I always like the exercise where it's like looking in the mirror, writing down what, right, and there's a list, right? The bad things. You may see something where, like, oh, my hair, I looks bad, right? And then write another section. Well, what is it that you see, right? And then what is it that you see that, well, in comparison to all that you see, what is true, right? Because even though you have these thoughts, even though you have these emotions, and when you look at the mirror, you see a certain thing, doesn't mean that it's always true. And so, what is true, right? And it's having to build that, as Jay was saying, in what is true, right? Because we travel with so much in here in our minds of negative self talk, right? And things that have been planted in us, things that have been spoken, right? And hey, listen, I will advocate and say that, and be honest that, I have experienced abuse, I have experienced trauma. And I found that for me, verbal abuse was the most difficult, right? Because it it stays with you, right?
Mm.
I am not enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough, right? Um, you don't feel of worth, so you settle for less, right? And based on your experiences, that's how you perceive relationships and how you should be treated, right? And it's really becoming self-aware and allowing yourself to feel. So what I would tell these individuals, allow yourself to feel. Doesn't feel good, and it's not to feel good. But guess what? It is through the feeling that you're going to heal. It's through the feeling that you're going to push forward, right? And so just feel. Feel whatever
Mm,
that you need to feel. And a lot of what we walk in shame, right? And
mm-hmm.
controls us. Shame. Don't tell anyone you're, because if you do, what are they going to think about you? You know, and for myself, like, you know, like I was sharing with you earlier, Terry, of like being an educator and having a degree, and knowing that myself, you know, abuse and experience abuse, and how instantly shame came
Mm-hmm.
of what that made me feel like.
Mm-hmm.
But although I feel the shame, doesn't mean that's who I am, you
Right.
know. And so when I sit with these women, I think the beautiful part of my job is no matter what they've experienced, and sitting there with them, and I really get to see their beauty. And that
Wow.
always amazes me. It comes in so many forms, so much resiliency. Um, so many are so intelligent, right? And it wows me because they don't see it in themselves. And so I use those things, those areas to encourage them, to build them up.
That's awesome.
So that's what
That's
I would say to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just feel, just whatever it is today, I feel what, right? And then just own that and then move forward from there. Jay, what would you say? Because we often say that tomorrow is a brand new day. And what am I going to do tomorrow to make sure it's a new day for me? So what do I do? What would you tell them?
I would say no longer look through the broken pieces of yourself. Don't find a piece of your self worth here, a piece of your self value there, a piece of this and a piece of that. The reality is, when something breaks and you put it back together,
Mhm.
as much as you put it back together, it's going to be imperfect. But who looks through the garbage for pieces? Nobody. So, what I would say is, you take the pieces of yourself that is on your person and you reinvent her.
Wow. 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 This is so good, Jay. I thank you so
Yeah,
much.
that's what I would say. Whatever that looks like,
Uh-huh.
you reinvent her, and because the mere fact is this: you survived, whether you survived on broken pieces or not. However broken those pieces are, however jagged they are a representation of who you are in that moment, right? And yes, shame is something that is automatically, instantly that comes up on you, but you don't have no shame. Show your battle scars. Being a victim of
Yeah.
domestic violence is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength, because the very same thing that you survived, somebody else did not survive. Therefore, because God is the greatest power,
He's
thank
the
you,
greatest
Father,
power.
we shall never be
Never
defeated,
be
not even
defeated.
as a domestic violence victim, or not even after you have experienced domestic violence. And I know that that seems like an elephant, like so big, but somebody told me that you eat an elephant one bite at a
One
time.
bite at a time. And then you know what? Something that you said earlier when you were saying it, you kept going back to you didn't want this to be your story, right? So
Yeah.
it's like I didn't get married to get divorced. So this was not the plan.
Wasn't
So
the
I think what we need to do as women in general is to realize it's okay to rewrite our stories, right? It's okay to, because we wrote it, because we said this is what I want my life to be. It's okay to turn the page and create a whole new chapter and rewrite the story. So if it seems like it's going that way, it doesn't have to stay that way.
Yeah.
But we hold on to the idea of, right. We hold on to the whatever that is in our minds, that it's going to be like this and it has to be this way. And if it's
right.
not like this, then, and so then that helps, that makes us hold on to some unnecessary pain and circumstances because we want that story. We want that perfect story.
Right.
But and then that's the shame. I think the shame is saying is having that title now. I'm a a domestic violence survivor, or now that's why we say that you guys are warriors. And but it's the shame of that. I don't want that to be my story. But it doesn't have to always be the end of the story, right? So that's what we're saying tonight, to make sure that you identify what it is, know what that you were created for so much more. When you do find I believe that when you do understand how God truly loves you, and he accepts you just the way that you are unconditionally, that there's nothing that you could do that would make him turn away from you. And then you have this other love that
Right.
doesn't line up with that
Right.
perfect love. When
Right.
you really realize the love of Jesus Christ, and how unconditionally there is zero nothing that you can do that will make him turn away from you, then you would say, you know what, I'm going to own that love. And this love right here, I got to get out of. I got to get away, because that's not what the Father has for me. And I thank you guys tonight. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted people to know what it looks like. I think when we brought it up in the church that we don't talk about it in our churches, because we're told to pray. We're told to pray and it's gonna get better. But if someone is physically abusing you, there is nothing in the Bible that says that you have to stay and take that. Okay. um Mentally abusing you, if it does not line up with the love of Jesus Christ and how he loves you unconditionally, and the peace of God, you know um then I would say contact these women. You can inbox Jay Allen on Facebook, and it is Jai Allen on Facebook. You can reach out to Chastity. Chastity's information is right there up under the screen. Chastity Crespo, you can inbox her as well. She has an agency she works with guys that can actually get you some help. The help that Jay was saying, that she went to different places to seek. Chastity works at those places. You're in New York, right, Chastity?
Yes, I'm in New York.
She's in New York, but she has access to information in other states. And then Jay, she's the Harriet Tubman. Jay is the Harriet Tubman.
Can I just say something really quick? I just
Sure.
want to say that to
Absolutely.
anybody that's watching, one way that you can help any victim is to release your judgment. A lot of
Mhm.
times women have shame because they're afraid of your thoughts about what they're experiencing. Asking questions like, well, what did you do for them to hit you? Or what did you
Yeah.
say to make this happen? If when you discover that somebody you know is being abused, why? First of all, there is no reason why. But second of all, just love on them and remind them how wonderful they are. If you take the focus off the abuser and pull them back to themselves, the goal is to get them back to the core of themselves so that they can be healed and move on. I just needed to say that.
You had to say that. And that's so good. I mean, we could go on and talk, because yeah, I guess that was the judgment that you received from the police officers. That was the judgment that, downtown, when you go downtown to get help, everybody's asking, so what did you do? And especially if they're not being abused, and if they're not in that situation, then it has to be your fault, right? So we all have to check ourselves. We all have to look within. We all have to do better. I like that thing that you're doing. Do you have a nonprofit or something with the earrings? Talk about the earrings. Can people donate earrings? Jay? Can people donate earrings to you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can people donate earrings?
Yes, people
How
can
how would they
donate
do that?
earrings. You can, if you send me a message on Facebook, I'm Jay Allen on Facebook. And make sure that if you donate earrings, can you donate a letter too? Can you just write her a letter too? I didn't do it as big. I don't know if I'm going to make it a huge event, but I still hand out earrings and letters when I pass a woman. And I don't necessarily have to know that she's a victim of domestic violence. But what I found is that I share the letter with them, and they reach back out to me and say it was what they needed at that time. So I'm learning that it's about encouraging, it's about uplifting, it's about empowering, it's about helping people get to be a better version of themselves. So if you donate earrings, would you also do me a favor and write a letter of encouragement to her as well?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Guys, thank you so much for your time tonight. We had some awesome people on the line and comments. People were talking about that they went through the same experiences. They love the idea of having that safety plan. Some people are going to reach out to you guys because they want to have private conversations with you. So we knew that this was going to be a great conversation. We knew that it was needed. If anyone that watches tonight needs help because you feel like you don't have anywhere to go, Chastity, there's an
Yeah.
800 number, I believe.
Yes, I have. So there's an 800 number. It's works in the entire United States. And it's called National Domestic Violence Hotline. And it is 1-800-799-7233. And here at this hotline, they give support and assistance.
And we're gonna definitely put it up. We're gonna put it up. Say the number again: 1-800
799
799
7233.
7233. And
33 SAFE, SAFE.
SAFE.
Yes.
Right. And so when you go, you can dial that number or absolutely just Google domestic violence awareness. The number pops up as well. Thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. We're going to have this conversation again. What month, and it shouldn't be 1 month, but what
October.
month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month?
October.
And it shouldn't be just 1 month because people are going through this every day. And so I know that I've been greatly impacted by this conversation. I'm definitely going to be seeking out some ways to be a better advocate. And again, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Chastity, get back to your retreat.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, good night, you guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.